The rain hammered the tin awning over my stoop like God himself was trying to drown Brooklyn. But nothing could wash away the copper tang of blood in the air when Leonardo stumbled up my steps at 2 a.m. His white button-down torn open at the collar, one hand clamped over his split lip. "Malcolm," he gasped, voice raw as gravel. "I need you to say yes to something that'll ruin us both, or save me." His eyes, those deep brown pools I'd caught myself staring into too many times over backyard beers, locked on mine, wild with a terror I'd never seen in the guy who laughed off muggings like they were bad dates. I yanked him inside before the neighbor's lights flicked on, the door slamming shut on the storm like a coffin lid. And that's when he whispered the words that shattered everything. "Marry me. Tonight. Fake it all, but make it real enough to fool the feds." I'm Malcolm Hayes, 42 years old, a high school history teacher in this slice of gentrifying Williamsburg where the hipsters sip oat milk lattes and pretend the ghosts of old Irish bars don't whisper about harder times. My life was a neat stack of lesson plans and solitary jogs along the East River, the kind of quiet routine that keeps a man like me. Divorced, kidless, and yeah, gay but buried so deep even my ex-wife hadn't clocked it. Safely invisible. I'd known Leonardo Russo for 6 months, ever since he and his 10-year-old son, Nico, moved into the brownstone next door. He was 35, an Italian-American graphic designer with a laugh that echoed off the brick walls and a way of leaning into door frames that made my pulse stutter. We'd bonded over shared gripes about the L train delays and impromptu barbecues, where he'd grill sausages with stories of his Nana's sauce recipes. He was out and proud, the kind of guy who wore rainbow pins on his messenger bag without apology, while I nursed my coffee in silence, wondering what it would feel like to stop hiding. That night, as thunder rattled the windows of my cramped living room, Leonardo collapsed onto my sagging couch, the envelope in his hand trembling like a live wire. It was a deportation notice from ICE, stamped with the cold finality of bureaucracy that doesn't care about love or second chances. Leonardo had come to the States on a student visa 12 years ago, fallen hard for an artist named Javier who got deported back to Mexico after a routine traffic stop turned into a nightmare. They'd married in secret, scraped by on freelance gigs, but Javier's death from pneumonia 2 years back, untreated because who the hell can afford meds on a shoestring, left Leonardo a widower raising Nico alone. The kid was a spitfire with his dad's curls and a sketchbook full of superheroes, oblivious to the shadows closing in. Leonardo's visa had lapsed in the grief, and now some pencil pusher in Queens had decided it was time to rip a family apart. "I can't lose him, Mal," Leonardo said, his accent thickening with the tears he wouldn't let fall. "Nico's all I got left of Javi. The lawyer says a green card marriage, sham or not, could buy us time for asylum. You're the only one I trust. Steady job, no record, American as apple pie. Say you'll do it. Please." His hand reached for mine, calloused fingers from late-night deadlines brushing my knuckles, and something cracked open in my chest. A chasm I'd papered over with dusty textbooks and denial. Marry him? Me? The guy who'd spent decades telling himself crushes on baristas were just appreciation? It was insane, a Hail Mary in a country that preached liberty but doled it out like crumbs. But looking at him, shirt clinging wet to his lean frame, I saw the man who'd fixed my leaky faucet at dawn without asking and cheered louder than anyone at Nico's school play. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word tasting like whiskey and regret. "Let's do it." The next 48 hours blurred into a fever dream of City Hall paperwork and a justice of the peace who eyed us like we were starring in a bad rom-com. We stood under fluorescent lights in our mismatched suits. Mine a relic from my wedding to Sarah, his a slim-fit number that hugged his shoulders just right, and exchanged rings from a pawn shop on Myrtle Avenue, cheap gold bands that felt heavier than they should. "Do you, Malcolm Hayes, take Leonardo Russo to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The JP droned, and I choked out, "I do." My throat tight as the lie settled in. Or was it a lie? When Leonardo's lips brushed my cheek in that obligatory peck, a spark jumped, electric, forbidden, and I pulled back too fast, blaming the AC. We filed the forms, posed for the Polaroid, and drove home in silence, the skyline smearing past like a watercolor in the rain. That night, as Nico slept over at a friend's, we cracked open a bottle of Chianti on my fire escape, toasting to the con of the century. His shoulder bumped mine, warm through the chill, and for the first time, I let myself imagine what if. The high didn't last. 2 weeks in, the conflict hit like a freight train from Jersey. Leonardo's family, old-school Italians from Bensonhurst, caught wind of the wedding through a nosy cousin who'd spotted the license online. His brother, Tony, a burly plumber with a cross around his neck and a homophobia sharper than his pipe wrench, showed up unannounced one Sunday, pounding the door like he owned the block. "What the fuck is this, Leo? Marrying some pencil-neck teacher for papers?" Ma's crying her eyes out. "You're shaming us all," Tony bellowed, his face purple under the bill of his Mets cap. Leonardo shoved him back onto the stoop, voice low and lethal. "Get off my property, Tony. This is my life, my son. You gonna call ICE on your own blood?" I hovered in the hallway, heart jackhammering, until Tony's eyes landed on me. "You," he snarled, jabbing a sausage-thick finger. "You're in on the scam? For what, a piece of ass? I'll bury you both." It escalated fast. Tony made good on the threat, tipping off an immigration hotshot with ties to the local VFW. Some ex-cop buddy who owed him a favor. Our marriage got flagged for fraud investigation. Agents showing up at my school mid-lesson, badges glinting under the smartboard as kids whispered and snapped pics. "Mr. Hayes, we need to ask about your recent nuptials," the lead agent said, her voice flat as the Midwest plains. I stammered through denials, but the betrayal burned deepest when I learned Tony had gone further. He'd convinced Leonardo's ex-sister-in-law, Javier's bitter sibling back in Mexico, to swear affidavits claiming Nico was better off with real family, not two queers in a fake union. Leonardo found out over a frantic call from his lawyer, crumpling the phone in his fist as we sat at our Formica kitchen table, takeout cooling untouched. "He sold me out," he whispered, head in hands. "My own blood. For what? To keep the family pure?" I reached across, covering his hand with mine, deliberate this time, no pulling back. "You're not alone," I said, the words a vow I hadn't planned. "Not anymore." That touch ignited the romance we'd both been circling like moths to a porch light. In the weeks that followed, as lawyers dueled and affidavits flew, we leaned into the sham harder than we meant to. Mornings became shared coffee rituals, my arm brushing his as we packed Nico's lunch, peanut butter sandwiches with notes shaped like stars. Evenings, we'd walk the dog, my mutt, Rufus, adopted him instantly, along the promenade, the Manhattan skyline glittering like a promise across the water. One dusk, as the sun bled orange into the river, Leonardo stopped, turning to me with that half-smile that undid me. "You know this started as a favor, right? But Mal, it's not fake to me anymore." His voice was soft, laced with the vulnerability of a man who'd lost too much to risk more. I swallowed hard, the city hum fading to nothing. "Me neither," I admitted, and then I kissed him. Tentative at first, salt from the breeze on his lips, then deeper, the world tilting like we jumped off the edge. It was clumsy, heartfelt, the kind of kiss that tastes like homecoming after years adrift. Nico hooped from 20 feet away. "Dad's kissing! Gross!" And we broke apart laughing, tears mixing with the joy. But betrayal's shadow loomed, twisting the knife. The climax crashed down in a stuffy federal courtroom in downtown Manhattan, the air thick with the scent of old varnish and desperation. Tony took the stand first, his testimony a gut punch. "My brother's confused, Your Honor. This marriage, it's a lie to steal citizenship. Leo's always been. And that kid? Nico deserves a real pa, not this circus." He avoided Leonardo's eyes, but the damage landed, the judge's brow furrowing as he glanced at our file. Leonardo gripped my hand under the table, knuckles white, his wedding band biting into my skin. When it was his turn, he rose like a man carrying the weight of oceans, voice steady but eyes shattering. "Tony's my blood, yeah, but family's not just DNA. It's the ones who stay when the world's screaming to run. Malcolm didn't just sign papers, he signed up for us. For the nightmares, the what-ifs. That's love, Your Honor. The real kind." The room held its breath, and then it was my turn. I stood, legs like lead, facing the woman in black robes who'd seen 1,000 stories like ours. "I'm not a hero," I started, voice cracking on the first syllable. "I'm just a guy who teaches kids about the Underground Railroad, about folks fighting for a shot at belonging." Leonardo asked for a favor and I gave it because seeing him with Nico, the way he loves fierce and full, it woke something in me I'd forgotten. This isn't fraud. It's faith. In him. In us. I glanced at Leonardo then, his face pale but proud, and the words poured out. The barbecues, the late-night talks about Javi. The way Nico's drawings now featured Uncle Mal as a caped crusader. The judge leaned forward, pen tapping, and for a heartbeat, I thought we'd lost. Tony's glare burned from the gallery, a final twist of the blade. But then she ruled. Asylum granted, marriage upheld. "In a nation built on second chances," she said, her voice echoing off the paneled walls. "We honor the truths that bind us, not the lies that tear." The gavel fell like grace, and the courtroom erupted. Our lawyer hugging us, reporters scribbling. Tony stormed out, the door banging shut behind him, but Leonardo didn't chase. He turned to me instead, pulling me into an embrace that smelled of his cedar cologne and relief. Our foreheads touching as sobs shook us both. "You saved us," he murmured. Outside, under a sky finally clearing, Nico barreled into our legs, yelling about ice cream, and we walked home as three husband, son. The brownstones welcoming us like old friends. It's been a year now, and the favors faded into forever. We renewed the rings with something custom, etched with veritas. Truth, because that's what we built from the ashes. Tony sends cards at Christmas, terse but thawing, a crack in the wall. Me, I came out to my students last spring, lesson on Stonewall turning personal, and the applause drowned my fears. Love, it turns out, isn't a lightning strike. It's the slow burn of showing up, day after rainy day. Leonardo still sketches at the kitchen table. Nico still draws us as heroes, and on quiet nights, when the L train rumbles distant, I hold him close and think. Unbelievable, yeah, but real as the river running beside us.